or United Nations Resolution 1618. She brings it back to the United States as a soft treaty, trying to implement this here in initiatives, in small initiative groups, to try to get this pushed in through our Congress and then Senate and then have this passed, that the First Right Amendment is going to change and we're going to adopt anybody who speaks ill of Islam can be just like M103. Are any of you aware of this? Well, this has been going on since 1999. It passed in 2005 to the United Nations. Then 2011, she signs on to this, brings it back to the United States. Secretary of State, the day after Christmas in 2015, she signs on, over 100 Democrats sign on to another resolution called 569. Now I'm going to show you real quick a video, and we got the volume, right? Wes?
Yes.
Hopefully we get the volume on this. I'm
the sound jack.
I don't know some jackets.
This is for sound right here.
So while he's working on the technical, so many of the people that you see on here have also spoken here in Minnesota. Many of them were working with the federal agencies to try to out what 1618 was doing. It was taking away your First Right Amendment. And they're going to testify that Islam said that at the higher power said that they could take us over through our voting system. And once they get into our voting, into our laws, into our Constitution, they will take us over from the inside. Every time I've tried to play this, it's the best part of it.
Speaker. Down, it's very soft.
It needs to just be turned up. It's coming.
It was loud before on my computer. It was really loud. Remember, it was too loud. Yeah, your radio. You need your bottom row. There. Yeah, it's unmuted.
Steve Kaufman was just spoke in Minnesota a few years ago. He was a whistleblower. He worked for the intelligence agencies, and he wrote part of the Red Dream Axis. And he goes on to tell you that they have invaded every part of our federal systems. They've also invaded every aspect of Minnesota's state governments, from the state representatives to the legislatures. They are writing policies along with Tim Walz. They are writing policies. I'll talk about that now while I'm sitting there. This past 2 years since Tim Walz has become governor, he created a 29 transition team to implement programs like this, and it's called Thriving by Design Blueprint. Has anybody ever heard of that? There are two organizations called Growth and Justice and OneMinnesota.org that combined forces, and they wrote a blueprint on how they think Minnesota is supposed to look. And they are attacking anything outside the urban areas. They are coming out here to try to implement all these programs into the rural communities because they want us to look exactly like this. And the rural environment must look like the urban environment. I've been to their meetings. I've heard what they said. I've studied their stuff. And they are on a full-out attack. They have put human rights commissions in at least 3 cities. Many cities already have these human rights commissions, but they just put really 2 or 3 big ones in Worthington, Bemidji, and Duluth just recently. But many cities, even Rochester, has a human rights commission. They already had one here. St. Cloud has it. Wilmer has them. All designed to implement these programs and to take away your First Right Amendment away from you. And Tim Walz is on a fast track. If you guys could read oneminnesota.org or the Thriving by Design Blueprint, it states in there that it's only for people of color that they're working on, called ALANA. It's a national organization. American, Latino, African American, and Asian. Hope I got that right.
Sorry, Ron.
Can't get it? I've never been able to put
It worked out on my computer, I don't know. It's okay.
I've never been able to show this. You could get this on the web. You'd see that they have infiltrated every aspect, even our voting in Minnesota. And they are working on us at high rate speeds.
Ron, what's the name of this? What's the name of this?
The video, you go on YouTube and just type in Hillary Clinton 16/18 and then just watch this video. And you have to watch, there's going to be some, let's see, I'll show you what it looks like so you can see it. Go to the one that when Exotic was sitting right there. Whoops. 16/18.
Ron, if you have any links that you want people to have,
Yep.
I can add them to this video when it goes on the channel.
Okay.
So people will see the links that you want them to have.
This is the one you want to go to. It's about a 4-minute video. It explains in detail from our top advisors what they're doing and how they're infiltrating into our government. So I've never been able to play that as much as I've tried. So in a 3-day closed-door meeting, she knows that it will not be able to get past her. She has to do it stealth in the United States, and she has to work with the Democrat Party to try to get this implemented so that the people would never know that it's even happening. So in December of 2015, she gets over 100 Republican or Democrat congressmen to sign on to it. And her conference announcement at the bottom says immediately reigniting the OIC demands for the West to punish anti-Islamic speech. That's what that was written. That's said right in the 16, is to punish anybody who does anti-Islamic speech. So Hillary Clinton brings that back to the United States in 2015. So let's look at what anti-Islamic speech says. I study Islam. I study the Quran. They understand there's 5 schools of Islamic jurisprudence, which means there are 5 juries out there, depending if you're in Iran, if you're in Iraq, depends on what part of the world you're at. There is a jurist. And these juries are school of Islamic jurists are sitting there, and they have some slight differences on how they see the punishments or how you're supposed to act in Islam. Well, they're called Hanbali, Maliki, Shafi, and Hanafi. And each one of these schools vary slightly on how they see how to deal with Islam or Sharia law. If you look under Hanafi, it says blasphemy, and in red it says if a non-Muslim commits blasphemy, his punishment must be tazir, discretion can be death, arrest, or caning. Each one of those, as you can see, has death in it. So, Islamic law states that if you say anything towards Islam, it is a punishment of caning or mostly of death. Now, why would that be brought to the United States even as a form of punishment when it doesn't even adhere to the United States Constitution? Why would Hillary Clinton bring that to us? Because their own laws under Sharia says it's in violation of the Constitution, but it is acceptable in the land of Islam. So when she brings it back, they signed a House resolution called 569, and condemning violence, bigotry, and hateful rhetoric towards Muslims in the United States. You notice it does not say anybody else but Muslims. If you look below in the Quranic verse 533 or 3357, having been the most commonly used in Islamic history to justify punishments of blasphemy. So even their own laws state this specifically. And it says the only punishment of those who wage war against Allah and his messengers and shave and strive to make mischief in the land, that they should be murdered. Okay, now why would Hillary Clinton bring this to the United States? It's in violation of her First Right Amendment of free speech. But she does. She brings it here, and would anybody ever sign on to this? You know, because remember, the Constitution says that we have a democracy, and how you vote for what? You vote for somebody that they, as long as they follow the republic of the laws of the land. The only part of a democracy is that you have the right to vote for somebody who adheres to the law of the Constitution. So if that's the case, then why would we have congressmen adhering to another law outside of the Constitution? Why would we have it? So look at HRES 569. It mentions no mention of Christian, only Muslims all the way through here. And this is the resolution. If you speak ill of a Muslim, you say anything, this is their resolution. It says, whereas this Muslim community is recognized as having made innumerable contributions to the culture and economic fabric and well-being of the United States society, then it goes on. But you notice no mention of Christians anywhere in this document. But here are the congressmen that signed on to this. These are the congresspeople that signed on to this. As you can notice, Keith Ellison's right on top. No surprise, is it? We also have Miss McCullum. Betty McCullum signed on to it. That's 2. Then Tim Walz signed on to it, 2-1 of 16, and Richard Nolan. So you got all, at that time, 4 Democrats in Minnesota that signed on to an anti-blasphemy law in Minnesota or the United States if this was to pass. Now, this did not pass. This was introduced. They couldn't get enough traction. They couldn't get this to go forward. They tried. They tried their darndest to get this to go through. But they couldn't get beyond this. No Republican would ever sign on to this. But as time went on, you know, you can see, again, is this hate speech or free speech? It's free speech, but he's endorsing Antifa, Keith Ellison. So, as time went on, after 569, they cannot get this to go anywhere. So, in April 4th of 2017, 4 people get together, 3 Democrats and 1 Republican. Kamala Harris, Feinstein, and what's the third one? Collins. 3 Democrats and 1 Republican. Can you guess who the Republican was? Marco Rubio. Signs on to Senate Resolution 118. Now, they knew they couldn't get, they knew they couldn't get 569 to pass, so they had to change the terminology. They could not just use Muslim anymore. So they did. They changed the terminology to Sikhs, Hindus, Jews, Muslims, and minorities. Is there one missing? Christians are not in there. So these 4 that I just mentioned signed this Senate Resolution 118 in the Senate. It passed. It passed the Senate. Anybody know this? It is now sitting in the House right now in a resolution called 257. Now, I'm just going to stay on 118. If you read this, it says that they passed 118 in 2017. And what's interesting about this, what's interesting is the ones who wrote 118 was not the United States senators or anybody in our federal government. It was 2 Islamic organizations called Emerge USA and the Muslim Public Affairs Council. It was nobody in our federal government that wrote and hate speech laws. Emerge USA is one of the most powerful organizations in America today who write and protect Hamas and defend them in terrorist trial cases. These are two organizations that are extremely powerful under Hamas. And they wrote this, and our senators signed it and passed it to take away your First Right Amendment, just like M103 in Canada. Now it's sitting in the House. As you can see, Muslims across America were full in celebration on commemorating hard work and dedication of Mark Rubio, where Emerge USA and they made the following public statement about them. So now we got this going on. Now we're sitting there, and it's in. Now, Emerge USA, formerly Engage USA, one of the most powerful organizations, Islamic organizations. The guy who was the president of it is also an attorney. His name is Karim Wahid. If you read here, he's a South Florida attorney. He defends the Council of Islamic Affairs, which is CAIR. He defends terrorists. CAIR has been known for representing various high-profile terrorists, including Al-Qaeda. Wahid previously served as legal advisor of the National Office of Council of Islamic Relations, which is CAIR. CAIR has been linked to Hamas leadership and in terrorist financing. So I started off the beginning when I said we are losing our liberties because who writes laws? Who writes laws? I told you that. Article 1 of the Constitution, Article 6 of the Constitution. Congress writes laws. Who wrote that? It wasn't Congress, was it? It's a terrorist organization. And we vote these people in there, and they are signing laws that are not written into law. They're not written by our own governments. This is what Agenda 21 is. Agenda 21 is primarily grassroots organizations writing initiatives, writing these different doctrines. They then submit it to a politician. The politician then puts it in as a bill. A prime example of that is what? Obamacare. Who wrote Obamacare? Even Nancy Pelosi said we won't know until we what? Huh?
Pass it.
Until we pass it, we won't know. Because they didn't write it. The Times Foundation and many other foundations wrote the Obamacare. So what we're seeing is these organizations are sitting behind the scenes being funneled money by the United States through grant money and 501c3s and 501c4s. They're lobbying for grant money, and then they're taking that money, distributing it back into the system, writing laws, writing regulations, and they're not even the ones that's supposed to write it. And then they give it to these politicians, and it says right here, they didn't write it. Two Muslim organizations wrote it. So, if this passes, then we just got duped, didn't we? It says here, now it's sitting in the House, HRES 257. It can't get any traction right now. It's not going anywhere as of now. Condemning hate crime and other forms of racism, religion, and ethnic bias, discrimination, incitement of violence, or animus. Now look at the word animus. Animus means thought or ill feeling. So if I have a thought that I say I dislike Islam, or an ill feeling, because that's what animus means, a thought or ill feeling. So now they're going after your thinking now. It isn't your actions, it's what you think. If I put it on the internet and I put it out there, I'm thinking out loud. It's your thoughts that they're going after. And they're working at you through the school systems. They're working at you through the colleges, through your jobs, implementing prayer through what? Through human rights. Because it's a human rights issue, it's a cultural issue, right? They just keep playing that same mantra, that same thing over and over. It's a human rights issue because it's who they are. Well, I gotta tell you folks, I know a lot about Islam, and it states right in the Quran that you're only supposed to pray 3 times a day, only under the Hadiths it says 5 times a day. And it also says that at any time you're in the land of what? In the land of Dar Harb, which is the land of abode of war, the land of the enemy, that you can bypass your prayer to the end of the day. So they don't have to pray during school. They don't have to pray at a job. They can bypass all that. But what do? We think it's the law and it's a human rights thing and we have to stop their assembly lines and allow them to pray. But their own law said, no, that's not it. That's not true. So we slowly subjugate the Americans. We slowly teach them. Because why? Because they don't read. They don't go into the books. How many politicians actually can go in and read what the Quran says? It's very simple. It's a war manual. Did you know that? The Quran is a war manual. It's 86% political and 14% ideology. 14%. And it doesn't work without Muhammad, and we know what Muhammad was, right? We look at his history. Look what he married at when she was 9 years old. Look at his history of who he was. It doesn't work. He was a raider. He was a raider of a caravan raider. He was a polygamist. He had slaves. He had 29 slaves. He had up to 11 different wives. Polygamy. And this is how they, remember, Islam, you have to be, act, and do as Muhammad did. That's how they have to live their life every day, where he was in his life. So when we look at this, if we have an ill thought, it's also against what they're forced to be against the law. So 257 condemns any hate crimes, and I just mentioned that what it condemns here. And what's interesting about it is if it was to pass, it develops an interagency task force to collaborate on development and effectiveness strategies and efforts to detect, deter hate crimes in order to protect minority communities. Do you do that? It didn't say protect Christian communities. It didn't say protect Caucasian communities. It says under our law that they wrote to protect in an interagency task force to protect minorities. You were left out of the picture. Again, left out at the international level, the national level, and now your own government is leaving you hanging one more time. And again, it says right up there, hostile or ill feelings, that's what animus means, right up there. So, look at 257. Now, why did they write this? When did it write? Do you remember in South Carolina when that guy ran that car backwards into that crowd? There was a white supremacist here about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
This is when all of this, that was their mantra. That's when they said, okay, we must go after anybody who's white. So that, if you notice, they only refer to now in these doctrines as we are going to protect anti-Semitic, which is Jews, or Muslims against what? And the only time it's mentioned who they're going to protect you through is white supremacy. It doesn't mention that we're going to protect you against gang violence, the Crips, the Bloods, any of the gangs in the inner city or wherever they are. It doesn't protect you of that. But this resolution protects you against white supremacy. That's all it calls out. It doesn't call out any other hatred, only whites. Because it was written by 2 Muslim organizations and one other one, which was the Anti-Defamation League. Now, we got 257, right? Now let's go back a step. I said it comes from the United Nations. Ban Ki-moon was the Secretary General of the United Nations. Now Gutierrez is the Secretary General. He handed the baton to him. But when Ban Ki-moon was Secretary General, he assured the Anti-Defamation League that the United Nations shares its ambition of international sanctions against nations which do not enforce laws against intolerance. Again, back to human rights. So the Anti-Defamation League was assured by the United Nations that they would combat and enforce laws against intolerance. And then they sign on to another organization at the local levels called the Mayor's Compact, which there's only 4 cities in Minnesota that signed on to the International Mayor's Conference in Minnesota. Take a guess who they are. Rochester? 1. Nope. Minneapolis, St. Paul,
And Duluth.
so, and believe it or not,
St.
it's a
Cloud.
little tiny little town called East Grand Forks.
Oh.
They signed up. So they signed on to the Mayor's Compact, which is an international organization, which is a defamation of anybody who speaks ill of or anti-Semitic of Muslims or Jews, written by the Anti-Defamation League. Now they're coming at you from the local level. Jews are, according to the FBI statistics, they got the higher rating of hate crimes against them, and Muslims is way down here. They're almost non-existent. But they decided to co-partner together, and they wrote the Mayor's Compact. It gets a little confusing here because we have all these different levels. Because remember, the United Nations does not work unless it has grassroots organizations. It's not a top-down, it's a bottom-up. It only works. The top organizations at the United Nations give all their information down to the local levels, and then they build their grassroots levels and they go up. It's the only way this works. So Mayor Luther, this is where I got banned out of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. When I went on the news that night and called the radio station what they did, you could always pull up the Mayor's Compact and see all the signatories. Within days or weeks, all of that was pulled off at the national level. I outed them. I seen all the mayors, the cities that were signing on to this agreement. They are now bringing the human rights commissions into your town, and they are setting up task force in your town, and they're using 501c3s to go after you, and they are calling you out. They're going to call you out as time goes, and they're going to report you. And if they feel that you are a threat, if verbally, talking, publicly, all you have to do is make a call now. In Rochester, all you have to do is make a call, and I will be investigated, or you'll be investigated. Where did we ever see that in the history of time where citizens call out other citizens and then rat them out? Do you remember when that was? Nazi Germany. When the government created a program and they had their kids call out the adults. This is what we're seeing. We are now seeing a repeat of 1933 to 45. We are seeing the brown shirting. They are calling you out. They got task force. This is why Keith Ellison is so dangerous. They're creating task force and human rights commissions, and they're doing it all throughout Minnesota through the Thriving by Design blueprint, which Tim Waltz has implemented. And we see this in towns that they're implementing it in Rochester. And I don't know how many more cities signed on to this. 300 cities across the nation. And this is the first one in Minnesota that signed on to it. And then Sioux Falls, South Dakota signed on to it. There's only 6 up in the upper Midwest. I don't know how many now. Minneapolis could sign on to this. And it says Minneapolis condemns violence and hate speech. So they signed that in 2016 with Betsy Hodges. Resolution condemning violence and hate speech and expressing solidarity with Muslims. Again, there you go back to Muslims. It does not mention Christians in here, ever. You were excluded out of this program. Betsy Hodges signs on to that. And then, this is the resolution that they created. The same resolution under the Mayor's Compact that they have in other cities. And number 1 says, expressly rejecting extremism, white supremacy. Now, you all think white supremacy is just a bunch of Nazis running around, right? White supremacy is anybody who speaks out, and what do you call it, Wes? Deplorables? Anybody who believes in patriotism, anybody who's a conservative, that is all considered under this category, white supremacy and all forms of bigotry. But if you read number 9 says, encouraging residents and their communities to report hate incidences and crimes, including using hotlines and online tools. They're outing you. They're coming after you. Those of you who speak, that's why Wes started out tonight, they're shutting you down at different programs. They're shutting you down. If he puts it out, he has to go underground to do most of these events. Because they know they're coming after all of us. Everybody in this room. And people within these groups are coming, they're standing, they're taking pictures. That's why we don't have sign-up sheets anymore. They take pictures of our emails and they send those out and they go after us. We always got to be careful of who actually comes into these meetings. Now, we go back to 183, where Mark Rubio signed and condemning hate speech, anti-Semitism and hateful expressions. And that's another thing, hateful expressions. Hateful expressions. It didn't say speech, it said expressions. That is like if you were to wear something on your shirt, carry a Confederate flag on the back of your truck, or maybe even a United States flag, or saying the Pledge of Allegiance in certain city councils where they're trying to condemn you as they are. That's what they mean by hateful expressions, because if you say under God, now you are hateful to those who are what? Those who don't believe in God. That's a hateful expression. And condemning Muslim discrimination and bigotry against Muslims and minorities. It does not mention Christians in 183, which Marco Rubio and the Democrats signed on to. 183, condemning anti-Semitism and hateful expressions of intolerance. And you can see, again, the names. Some of these I will repeat to you, just so you can see the documentation that this stuff is real. Then 183 says, and again, you're going to notice through here, hateful expressions of intolerance, but again, it does not mention anywhere. It only mentions white. So if a black commits a crime on a white, that's not under this. It's only whites, the people that are in this room, because you are what? You want to learn, you want to be a good Christian, you want to be a good patriot, you are considered under this category. And then it goes on to talk about, in the United States, have exploited and continue to exploit bigotry and weaponize hate. They don't just say hate, they say it's a weapon. Now they're calling it a weapon. They weaponize hate for political gain, targeting traditional persecuted people, including, here we go, Alana, African American, Latino, Native American, Native Asian Americans. This is the theme that Tim Waltz is running on under his transition team. He's running under the Alana, under the